What is a dead giveaway of a toxic relationship? My 57-year-old colleague constantly has to send videos and pics of him working to his wife. My ex always tried to make me do this. Effing obnoxious. Guess who was eventually found out to never be where he said he was and was sneaking around instead? LOL. If someone is mistrustful, it suggests they may not be trustworthy themselves, as their belief that others are untrustworthy assumes others will behave the way they would. One partner always gets their way. For me, it was easier to bend over backward than to deal with the whining and complaining if I stood my ground. Easier is in quotes because it was only easier in the short term. Long term made life hell. Fine, whatever you want, just like always, whatever you want. Whatever I want? It's never whatever I want. When I wanted to see Stomp and you wanted to see Wicked, what did we see? We saw Wicked. When I said that I wanted to have kids, and you said, you wanted me to have a vasectomy, what did I do? And then when you said that you might want to have kids and I wasn't so sure, who had the vasectomy reversed? And then when you said you definitely didn't want to have kids, who had it reversed back? Snip snap. Snip snap. Snip snap. I did. You have no idea the physical toll that 3 vasectomies have on a person. And I bought this condo to fill with children. If someone is always talking crap about their partner whenever they are not together. I've seen this far too many times, it's always ended in total disaster within a few years at most. Lack of trust and constant fights. Having a partner in the relationship who insists that you have to fight in a relationship, otherwise you're not passionate about it. I've never had to deal with that personally. I've been married to my partner for 8 years and we almost never fight. But I heard a friend insist this and I was mortified for her relationships. Inability to take a step back, listen and analyze the other person's point and actually come to a conclusion during a conflict. Agreed, but sometimes I find that some alone time helps when trying to come to a conclusion for some things. Especially if emotions are high. No communication and everything is a blame game with no acceptance of responsibility. No communication can be used in this way too, by the way. When they are upset and you ask what's wrong, how can I change, how can I help the situation, how can I be better, etc. Their response is, I shouldn't have to tell you, you should already know this, if you really love me you'd already know, etc. Basically you should be a mind reader and already know what they need, etc. So what's the point of communication? When they say we need to work on our communication, but every time you bring anything up they get mad and start an argument. How are we gonna work on communication if I don't even feel comfortable bringing things up? 'Cause when I do it's a fight. I gave up with my ex. She was the one who said we needed to work on our communication. First time I said, can we talk about whatever was bothering me, it went completely sideways, because I was obviously the reason she did the thing that bothered me. It was a lose-lose situation. Which leads to hallway sex. Hallway sex is when you pass each other in the hall and she says, fuck you. And you say fuck you too. Break up, make up, break up, make up, rinse, and repeat. 15-ish years ago, I went through this in my early 20s. Mum told me it was toxic, I got mad and said she didn't understand and it was a sign we were meant to be together cause we couldn't stay apart. God, I wish I had listened to her and wasn't an idiot. Makes me cringe. I honestly think if you don't cringe about your past, you don't grow as a person. So good thing that you are cringing about that. Someone who does not let you have a life outside of the relationship and gets upset when you see friends or do hobbies you like, even if you make time for them. Quick addendum to that: if your shared responsibilities have changed during the relationship, the amount of free time you each have for hobbies will have changed. A partner that complains you spend too much time playing video games when you are just dating and don't even live together is probably being controlling. A partner that complains you spend too much time playing video games when you've got 3 kids together might actually be saying that they feel the labor distribution in your house is unfair. If you have joint responsibilities like a house or kids, you should both have a roughly equal amount of free time to pursue your own interests, or come to an alternative arrangement that you're both happy about. I see a lot of couples who start to fight because one partner's life changed a lot after having kids, and the other one's life didn't change much. The person who gets to go have hobbies in free time will often point at the healthy, happy children and say, look, they're fine, of course it's okay that I go do X with my friends, not acknowledging the kids are only okay because of the other parent's hard work. being yelled at / attacked for reacting to their abusive behavior. I am an angry person, I always have been, and I have struggled with it my entire life. Shortly after getting married, I experienced some trauma in my life that really messed me up for a while, and it went unaddressed for years. Fast forward a few years, I became very bitter. Angry, resentful, judgmental, and all while feeling like I was just being misunderstood simply due to my passion being mistaken as anger, and thinking I was fine from the trauma. I started to really become an awful spouse, an awful man, someone that I hated and was ashamed of because of how I would talk to and treat my wife. I became a man that I would never let my daughters date, let alone marry. We would argue, well, I would turn everything into an argument and then lose my temper at her for a number of perceived slights. Slights that never happened because I would interrupt her so she couldn't never say anything and only be yelled at. It was like clockwork. I did some very real emotional damage to my wife, making her feel like a small person in her own skin. I made her question why I didn't love her the way she loved me anymore or if I even loved her. It wasn't until we had a night of deep heart-to-heart conversation, after a blow-up fight, that she told me those things. She told me she didn't want to upset me and get yelled for feeling that way, so she didn't say anything before. She didn't want me to make her cry anymore. I realized how fucked up it had gotten in that moment. I heard her loud and clear for the first time. I was so sick to my stomach, looking at her as she cried and told me all of this with a look of the utmost apprehension and uncertainty on her face. I saw myself for what I had become, a verbally and emotionally abusive husband. I got myself into therapy the following week, got on some anxiety medication, and addressed the trauma that was the catalyst for me losing my way. I have been doing that for 3 years now. I cry a lot typing this stuff. I don't talk about it much because it exposes the worst side of me, a side that I have some real self-loathing over, but mainly because I can see her face in my mind when I talk or think about it. I see her crying while I scream at her, see her desperation to disappear. I was truly vile to her, all while she kept fighting for us and loving me harder. She was so desperate for me to love her, to just love her again and not hate her. She thought I hated her. I still have a hard time with that one. I was so bad, so angry and mean that my wife, the love of my life and mother of my children, thought I hated her. I only bring this up and go off on my tangent because I did this to her all the time, attacked her for defending herself, and I almost ruined my life over it. Over anger and the desire to be in control of something/someone simply because I had no control over my own feelings or emotions anymore. I was blinded by trauma, rage, depression, and anxiety, and I lost myself in it. I hurt the kindest person I have ever met, someone I promised to love and cherish forever, and I gave her some of the worst times of her life. Please, anyone who struggles with this, with anger or unchecked emotions, etc., please talk to someone. Don't let it get to the point that you hurt those around you, that you care for most. Don't let it force you to hate yourself when you look in the mirror. Don't let it get to the point that you lose your temper and hurt someone physically as well. If you are someone who has to deal with the brunt end of this type of scenario, please don't sit and take it. Please talk to someone, anyone. Please know you are worthy and you are not alone. You are not all of the awful things someone has made you feel about yourself. Please don't stay and ignore things until they get violent. Please don't let yourself be made to feel worthless by anyone else. When the efforts toward the relationship are highly imbalanced, one doing the receiving, the other doing all the giving. Driving home from work, you take a detour so the drive lasts longer. There was a study years ago about commuting long hours in traffic and why some people did it. Some were to have a bigger house, financial issues, etc., but there was a large percentage of workers who it turned out did it because it was the only time in their day where they could have some peace and happiness. Lack of autonomy. Things like having to vet every little thing you do with a partner, being isolated from outside relationships and not self-actualizing outside of the context of part of a couple. There is usually a power imbalance or at the very least an unhealthy level of codependency. If you find yourself feeling alone in the relationship. We had a friend who would not speak until after her boyfriend spoke. One night she was over for dinner without him and mentioned how her boyfriend was passionate and sometimes put his fist through their walls. After that comment she came to help me do dishes and I was like, that's not normal. You okay? Last time I punched a wall I was a 14-year-old boy. She eventually left him, but the fact that she always demurred to him, to me, is a red flag. One person does all of the housework / cooking / chores / shopping / maintenance / childcare, yet the other person continues to complain that they don't do it right.